Despierta. ¿Sabes qué día es hoy? Vas a transformar al mundo haciendo lo que amas. Vas a cambiar las reglas del juego. Vas a mover a otros. Busca, crea, innova, vuela. El mundo te espera. Transfórmalo. Hazlo, UPAEP.
I think today most of our assistance is going to be by video conference. We still thank each and every one of you who takes the time to be here, who takes the time to be here remotely. And today we're going to talk about being time travelers. Traveling through time. Now most people might get that image. All right, we talk about making our way through time, traveling. A certain generation will think about this. Maybe we belong to a slightly older generation, and this is the idea of an encapsulating time machine, of the ability to move through history and experience different things. But at the end of the day, these are stories. Right? These are fantasies that we've used to live out that idea that we want to matter. We want to matter longer than we're going to be here. Time is long, history's longer, the unknown history is even longer, and we want to figure out a way to matter, to let history and the universe and others know I was here. Know my name. Know what I did. So we've made many attempts, right? Humanity has developed magnificent art, sculptures, stone that stands the test of time, stone that can stand there and tell a story 1,000 and 2,000 and 3,000 years after we're no longer here. We've created beautiful architecture. Architecture that defies the elements, that defies gravity, defies convention. To say, we were here, we were thinking about this, we were making a statement. We've created beautiful art and not so beautiful art, and everything in between, to help us lead into this concept of reflection, pondering, telling a story, transmitting a feeling or a sensation, long after nobody even knows the name of the artist. We've written the great books. We've put down those great stories. Be them true or not, you know, Homer's Odyssey, is Homer a real person? Is Homer a pen name that we've applied to a whole collection of stories? Who knows? But we've written them down. We've tried to make our words last longer than we do. We went from creating the painting to taking that photograph, right? Capturing a snapshot of what that moment in time, that culture, that way of being might have been. We've created music. Music that can transport you into a different emotional state. It can send you to those highs and lows. It can be symphonic. It can be dissonant. It can be the combination of symphonic and dissonant like we've got here. We've developed film to capture even more of those details, more of those nuances of what it was we intended to transmit, how I intended to transmit it, allowing my voice to tell the story, my body to express this thing, color to mean something, framing to mean something else, exposition to tell a hidden story, things to guide the way I'm supposed to feel and understand and interpret something. And these things have lasted, many well beyond the original creator's death. There's a lot of argument as to how old this concept of leaving this something, this art, this expression behind could be. One of the assumptions about this piece is it could be up to 40,000 years old. Much longer than we have any record of any kind of language. We have no idea the sounds that those humans might have used to express these concepts, and yet they left something that we can then look at and interpret, feel, and try to understand later. We've created magnificent tombs and mausoleums. These structures that say, I was here, this life mattered, I was important, or I loved this person. Okay? They're magnificent stories you can find. But we're really missing an interesting element. We've told stories, we've transmitted ideas, we've given art, we've sent out the spoken word. But at least in my way of, admittedly biased way of viewing this, one of the elements we often leave out when we're thinking about this kind of time travel is teaching. Teaching is much harder to gauge. It's much harder to see how that's going to live through the ages. If I make a beautiful David, I can imagine that if it's kept safe, it'll be that way for 6,000 years. Carved in marble, made in stone, kept safe somewhere. But this class, these words, do I have any kind of gauge to experience, to know, to feel how long that effect is going to transcend? And this teaching, this idea of leaving that knowledge behind, those values, those experiences, it comes in many forms. We often say teaching, and we think of this, right? The schoolroom, teaching young children, kind of leaving a lesson behind, a lesson plan. You've got measurable outcomes. Now it's all the fashion to talk about learning outcomes. You know, what's the outcome of your learning? Just a few years ago, because it's the last book that the Secretary of Education read, it was competencies. And then a few years before that, objectives. Right? So we think of the classroom as one of these. That time spent at home, reinforcing the learning, sharing that knowledge, those experiences, helping through the problems, developing a sense of joy and desire to learn. That doesn't come just from the school. The time we spend alone, learning that we have to power through this, learning that there is a deeper purpose, or doing it just because I really, really want that time on the tablet. And there's no other way to earn it. There's generational teaching. There's the things that came before and the things that will come long after we're gone. And there's that moment of encounter between these. And there's depth, there's value, there's need. There's reaching out and taking the opportunity wherever you are, whatever the resources are, whatever the opportunity, to teach, to share. Teaching is also learning a discipline. Teaching is not always pretty. Teaching is not always wonderful butterflies and tremendous feelings? Does that look like a fun moment? Does that look like either one of those people would like to do this thing for the rest of their lives? But is it necessary? This young man could face a scenario where the body shuts down and does not want to do something, and it could endanger his lives or the lives of others. He has to learn, to listen, obey, and follow an order, even when everything inside of you says, you know what? I'm going back home. Pokemon is more fun than this. Okay? That man is helping to save that person's life, potentially. It's a necessary moment. Should it be that way forever? No. It's hard to see here in the room, but discipline, learning, training, establishing goals, setting these ideas that you want for yourself and your life, and pushing through the pain, the difficulty, the problems. It's a valuable thing to learn in any aspect of our lives. Now, discipline can be beautiful, but discipline can also end up not necessarily having a tire truck. I mean, that's really pretty. The value of doing that, not necessarily gigantic in the I learned to walk well, but it's the other lessons that came before that. Consistency, commitment, dedication, doing something because you have that goal. I'm sure nobody started that being perfect the first day. Values that we teach with our words, with our actions, in our homes, each and every day. This is also teaching. Teaching transcends and encompasses so much. These initial examples we showed of time travel, that art, sculptures, that architecture, they all have a very strong teaching element. It's hard for an individual to get to those heights alone. I woke up one day and I decided I'm going to make a beautiful piece of art nobody's seen before with absolutely no training. It's possible. There's likely a lot of teaching involved. It can be the training and the discipline to develop those abilities. It can be in using the products as a vehicle for teaching others. Studying this art, studying this sculpture, studying this text, studying this beautiful math equation to understand something else about the universe. Teaching can transcend time, space, culture, language, and history. But it can also be limited by it. It's up to us to make that difference. How much time do we have to teach? Is it a long time? I mean, I would hope that we all get the opportunity to be as jolly as this grandmother here. 102, it's a very good age. It's also far outside the expectation of most people. Maybe by at least 20 years outside. So she represents an extreme statistical outlier of humanity, somebody who's lived an extremely long time, 102 years. That's a long time to leave behind stories, values, training, teaching, words, invest your lives in others. But is even 100 years a long time? How long has that tree been alive? How long did it take for that canyon to form in which that tree lives? Not this band of stars up there. How long is our life? It's a bare, tiny whisper of an existence. The universe blinks and our time is over. That time being one of those most valuable assets that we have in our lives. No amount of money, no amount of power, no amount of recognition or fame can buy you one additional second. You can't recover the time that you've spent. You can't trade that time with somebody else. And it is a limited commodity. Yours will run out. Do we know how much sand is in our clock? I know, it seems like a little bit of a downer, right? But to me, it has the opposite effect. We have no idea how much time we have. And I think that's a blessing. If we knew exactly how much time we have, that might become the sole focus of our lives. I was talking about it recently with somebody who's slowly transitioning into understanding a chronic disease, something I'm relatively familiar with. And I said, it's interesting because it's a psychological shift. It's looking up and for the first time in your life realizing that sword of Damocles is up there. That mythical sword that hangs by a single horsehair, it's called the end of this clock. Many times it's disease, accident, the death of somebody close, that first turns our eyes up to that sword. And we learn, and we understand, and we internalize that mortality for the first time. Part of being a functional adult is learning to take your eyes off of that sword and back down onto your life. If we focus on that, if I spend the rest of my life just looking at each one of those grains of sand coming through, I will have wasted every one of those seconds. Now, there's a flip side. Teaching is not in and of itself a guarantee of a positive outcome. Teaching can go in exactly the opposite direction. Teaching is not the solution. It can also be a part of the problem. As we look at our beautiful country, filled with amazing and wonderful people, what have we been teaching where money, power, recognition, fame matter more than the lives of 60,000 fellow citizens or 100,000 fellow citizens that all this narco violence has caused in the last few years? That's a failure in what we've been teaching the people all around us. It's failure in values. It's failure in what it is that must matter in our lives. It's bad teaching. We praise these guys. Gandalla no batalla. Sin narcocorridos. Oh, those guys are so cool. The Chapo's going to have a beer, ain't that? You can go to the store and buy veladoras with Malverde, and Chapo, and other people on them so you can pray to God for more success for these things. This is a failure of teaching. How many children throughout the world suffer violence, neglect, abandonment, imprisonment, refugee status, war? Being able to create this pain in somebody young, in somebody whose innocence is ripped away in the process, is a gigantic failure in teaching. Oh, well, their parents should have behaved better. You know, they're the child of a drug addict. What can you do? Well, their country needs to take better care of them. We don't want them here. You provoked me. You know, you better watch your mouth. Might set me off. Acting as if we have no control over the words that come out of our mouths and the actions that our bodies undertake. These are the two things I have the most control over in my life. I might not have control over how long I'm going to live. I might not have control over whether somebody does violence to me. I might not have control over where I was born and the wealth I have access to. But I have control over what I say. I have control over what my body does, barring, involuntary movements and spasms. But you know what I'm talking about, intentional. This is bad teaching, perpetuated through those myths. Well, I have a bad character. I have a bad temper. No, you don't. You have bad teaching and bad control. Violence is no longer something that is limited to us adults. But when I see violence in children, I see a failure in teaching. Or even better, magnificent learners. Those children are learning from us. They're learning from the things we put in front of them. They're learning from the words that come out of our mouths, the actions we perform with our bodies, and the tools we give them to distract them while we're doing something else. I was in a gang in California in the 2nd grade. My father thought he saw me get shot on the playground. That's the reason they took me out of that school. And we changed the way that my own education was run. Columbine happened the year I started university. We haven't stopped. This hasn't become a single tragedy or a terrible moment or a massive aberration. It has become the status quo in way too many lives. Does anybody recognize this gate? Because those words should be burned into the conscience of humanity. Translated, work makes you free. Auschwitz. They just had the memorial last week, the Auschwitz Memorial. Survivors got up and spoke. They taught with their words, with their experiences, with their lives. But what is most heartbreaking, especially to those survivors, is that we're forgetting those lessons. Poland, the country in which Auschwitz is located, elected its first extreme far-right, anti-non-European, anti-immigrant party for the first time a couple of years ago. This is in their backyard. But you know what? Those people that are not like me, they're kind of bad. It really hurts me in my taxes. Oh, ouchie. That was just bad Nazis. They were bad. They were bad. We're good. We're just trying to keep our people safe. Okay? Bad teaching. And when we forget the results, we go right back to the same mistakes. The world seems to be in flames. And yet there's nothing new about that. I don't have the statistic on me right now, but something about the last couple hundred years, the world has been at peace only 20 or 30. Every day, everywhere is conflict, strife, anger, violence, hatred. We keep telling ourselves that we're fighting the battles to end them forever. That we're doing this sacrifice now so that the lessons will stay with us always. These are the D-Day landings on Normandy. The people getting off of those boats, crashing through those waves and getting shot by the hundreds and thousands, believed that they were doing this so that this didn't have to happen again. This is Mexico, a few weeks ago, months ago. An armed militia of people pushing drugs decided to take on the military and say, we get to decide. The violence is with us. We haven't learned these lessons. We haven't taught these lessons. And we forget these lessons. I just showed you the picture of those people storming the beaches. 25 years before that, the people fighting the Great War called it the war to end all wars. They knew they were doing this so that nobody else had to again. And in only 25 years, we were back at it. With a tremendous slaughter, with a Holocaust, with an eradication of entire countries and cultures, back at it with the hate. We now have a new version of war and strife in our world. There are kids in college today for whom the war on terror has always existed. Their entire life, the world has been at war in the Middle East. And there is no end in sight. The refugee crisis around the world has gone on and on and on and on and on. Go back to any generation that you want. You'll find these. The outpouring of refugees from the Far East during the Vietnam War. The resettlement, the hatred, the dislike of anybody that even resembled somebody from Vietnam. Oh, great, now these people are coming to take all our jobs. Africa, Rwanda, Somalia, Central South America, Syria. This continues to happen. We continue to fail at teaching and thus transforming our humanity. Teaching is that thing that will help us transcend. We remember not one of us has one more minute of life guaranteed. Nobody here, nobody listening, nobody watching this recording. I have attended the funerals of students of mine, fellow colleagues, teachers, friends. We don't know how much time that is. It could be today, it could be 50 more years. When I turned 19, I was told by the doctors to quit everything I was doing with my life. Be done. Quit school, quit working, take apart, go home and learn to paint watercolors. Because you're going to die. But if you do that, maybe you'll live until you're 35. Give up. Be done. Be peaceful. Enjoy the time that you have left. Thankfully, I had a great-grandfather that had taught me that lesson a lot earlier than that. Living every day afraid of what's coming, that's already a death. That's already being done, being finished. If I don't know when it's going to come, but I spend every single moment afraid of that, then I've already lost the battle. Thankfully, 35 is already some years back. I didn't quit school, and I'm still here, and I take every opportunity that I can to teach, because it is a way to transcend. We have today, here, and now to leave that mark, to touch those lives, to share those words, those moments, those values, that encouragement and those lessons to transcend. And we write the stories of the future with every one of those decisions. That hangs in my room. It's a picture of a not well-designed family tree. But we have lessons and stories, teaching, faith, handed down through generations. A month ago, we packed a homemade apron that she made way back in the 1850s or 60s. And those values, those stories, that faith, that teaching, those moments are with us. They set the standards for who we can be today, for what we can do with that time from here on out. And I like keeping that in there because I like remembering how these stories and this teaching will be here way, way after I'm gone. We were taken out of school because of the gang violence. So I studied at home. We taught ourselves, we found a good system, we found something challenging, and in 1997, there we are in the dining room table, finishing my last bit of homework for high school. College was next. In the background, you can see a stove we inherited from my great aunt, who used it to cook for my grandfather when he was a little boy. We still cook on that stove. We still create memories and love and tradition and family around those moments. The abilities that my family helped me obtain through that teaching led to the university story. Upper left-hand corner there is Dr. Thomas Kane. Dr. Thomas Kane was an Austrian who fled the Nazis in 1938. He went to the United States. He had nothing, so he studied. He worked, he tried, he strove, he failed, he persevered, and he became a professor at Stanford. At Stanford, he taught Dr. Gary Yamaguchi. Dr. Yamaguchi, brilliant physicist, excellent engineer, wanted nothing to do with education. He was going to change the world through nuclear fusion. In the 1980s, they realized that dream was not going to happen in his generation. He was very depressed. They said, we've got the theory, we understand what we need, and the technology doesn't exist. It's going to be 20, 30, 40 years before this can happen, so time to find a new career. Fusion is over at the Lawrence Livermore National Labs. And after being depressed for a day, he went and he sat at the lunch counter. I'm telling this story that I heard him tell at the university, so all credit to him. And he sat down completely depressed. And a friend of his said, "Hey man, you look down. Can I come and sit with you?" What happened? So he told him his sad story. You know, my life dream is over. His friend said, "Oh, that is bad. So what are you going to do?" I mean, this is not something that can be fixed. No amount of desire is going to change this. So what's next? I don't know. Nothing's going to be the same. This is the dream, and now there's no dream. Go teach. You know, there's a brand new field called biomedical engineering. It needs people to set new ideas. Why don't you go do that? What am I going to do? Teach 100 students, 1,000 students? Oh, biomedical engineer, am I going to make 100 prosthetics? Ooh. I mean, thank you, it's a good idea, but I was going to change the world. Now you want me to go and be a professor. Thanks. The friend leans back and goes, "Oh, you're right, I apologize." I was wrong. It's all right. Not only are you a liar, but you're a selfish liar. What? I mean, could you just leave me alone? Today's been a rough day. My career is over and my future's done. Like, is that not enough bad things? Now you have to call me names? Yeah. You're a liar. And you're selfish. You said you wanted to change the world. That's not true. You want to see the world change because of something you do. That's a very different thing. You want to change the world? Invest in people's lives. And then Dr. Yamaguchi paused his story. And he said, let me tell you about my friend. His friend had a disability. His friend had cerebral palsy. And his friend had taken 10 years of special education to get his master's degree in physics. But he was working at a national research laboratory. So unpause. He says, my friend turns to me and he says, people invested their time in you. I'm here because someone thought it was valuable to show others that my disability could be worth something. And now I work here and I teach others. I go and I visit families of children with disabilities and I say, look at me, your children matter. Now that's not going to change the entire world this year, but it makes a solid difference. And he says, so you have to decide. Is it that you want to see the world change or that you want to change the world? And so he became a teacher, and he taught Roger Gonzalez, he taught me. Now I have students, and my students have students. This is a chain that goes on unbroken. Dr. Jones, my doctoral degree, and that leads to one of those best feelings in the world. When you go up, they put the hood on you and they turn around and they present you as Dr. So-and-so for the first time. And yet that is only the beginning, because what comes after that is a lifelong responsibility of teaching. To teach is to let loose an arrow. When a warrior fires an arrow, that effect is much further than the warrior can reach himself. It flies far and it goes away. We have an arrow that flies through time, into the unknown, into the uncertain future. It's a future filled with challenges. It's time that is filled with both victory and defeat. We have to teach for lifelong learning. We have to help those around us learn how to learn. Learn how to not forget those lessons. Learn how to not make those same mistakes. And it is an inescapable responsibility. People around us learn all the time. The children in our lives learn all the time. The students in our lives learn all the time. Our co-workers learn from us all the time. What I do matters. We will teach those who then teach others. And we will transform that future in ways we can't even tell. Now there is something called transformative teaching. It's a theory. And here at UPAEP we have a mission to educate leaders that will lead to transformation. But what does that even mean, right? Theories and philosophies abound. We could spend an entire Congress talking about what this means. We won't come to a consensus. So we'll talk about one of these, transformative learning theory. And it proposes that in order to shift a person's paradigm, we need processes and conditions in place to set the stage for that transformation. 5 things. First, an activating event that exposes the limitations of our current knowledge or approach or theory about life. Opportunities for that student to identify and articulate the assumptions that lead me there. Critical self-reflection as the student considers, where do my assumptions come from? Why did I make these choices? Why do I feel this way? How these assumptions influence or limit your own understanding. Critical discourse with others. Why do you feel that way? Well, why do you think I felt that way? What is it I'm not seeing about myself? And opportunities to test and apply these new perspectives. You need these things to set the stage for somebody to be transformative in their learning. Now, it's up to us to make this process. It's up to us to make this process safe. You have to be safe and know that it's safe to question your assumptions. It has to be effective. We have to praise the right changes. We have to help see mistakes. It has to be welcoming, open, and widespread. It's about a lifestyle, not a classroom, not a moment. And it has to be an act of true, selfless, and transcendent love, wanting what is best for the people around us. I like some of these images. They can be translated in many different ways within your own perspective. These can be parental, they can be teaching, they can be all sorts of different things. But you can transform the experience of someone through the action of teaching. You can help knowledge stave off ignorance. You can help cross difficult and dangerous waters to achieve more success than I was ever able to as a teacher. I can be the stepping stone through which somebody else can be better. And the more that humanity does that, the better off we all will be. We build a different future every single day. We build friendship. We build good friendship through good teaching. We build love. And a love that transcends merely a momentary infatuation of pure physicality. We create a desire to help, and not just those that can do something for me. We come together as community. This was in the Puebla Zócalo right after the 2017 earthquake. Brigades of people on motorcycle to help deliver people out to where they needed to be in the city. We can change the way our nation responds to challenges from the outside. We can create a society where people find themselves included and not limited, pushed forward instead of pulled back. We can help people understand value in every form of life, family experience, and interaction, we can spawn the great thinkers that can transform the way we approach the difficult problems. Frederick Douglass, Morelos, Lincoln. This is an act of all of us coming together. Everybody has a hand in creating this new future and new world. And we all have the opportunity every day to be that transformative teacher. This last week, Saturday to be specific, we buried a friend. Here we are in the first week on the dorm, Igloo, myself. Great man, loving husband, dedicated father. Last week, he lost his battle to cancer. 3 kids, a wife, family. And as difficult as the entire year before that was, one of the things that Sam did was use the time that he had to teach and to leave behind that love. These things that I'm talking about here are reality. They could have stayed behind in the state where he was diagnosed and tried to stay in that hospital and stay in that hospital system, but they moved back home so that their children's lives would be as non-disrupted as possible. He spent the time that he was feeling better remodeling their home. They have many pictures of them smiling together, putting things together, and building the space in which that family now lives. Every corner of that space has that hand of love and intention and teaching. He took many pictures, even at the hospital, smiling, joking, laughing, remembering. Because he knew that if he beat the cancer, and if he didn't beat the cancer, what he did with that time, with his children, with his wife, mattered. If he beat the cancer, these would be memories for a long time to come of how we weathered something difficult together. And if he didn't, then there would be memories that years after the pain has gone down, you can go back to and look at and smile. And remember the intentionality of that love. Sam was a great guy. And he did that. Just like at the end of Saving Private Ryan, you just hope that you get the opportunity to get to the end of life and say, I hope that I have done well with the time that I've been given. An act of love can cast a long shadow in time. Today we have a new day, a new moment, a new year, a new opportunity. What do we choose to do with that? What will you do? I choose to travel with time. Thank you. Do we have any questions? Preguntas? Dudas? I need to go be somewhere quiet and alone for a little while. I need to go hug the people that you love. How about online? Tenemos alguna pregunta en línea? You can also write them in. Nos pueden escribir si tienen. And if not, lo que podemos hacer, what we can do, is thank you for your time. Thank you for the opportunity to teach and to leave some idea or some moment behind.
I have a question. What do you think about education? It's not the same that teaching.
Education is a formalized process in many cases. Education is a necessary step of life. Education is something that can happen within a classroom setting, within a home setting, and it's fundamental. But education is many times divorced from true teaching. It's simply checking a box, fulfilling a requirement. Oh, well, let's see, you passed this class, you had an 8, you got a 7, there you go, you get your degree. You know? But to get past education and go to true transformational teaching, or in Spanish, formación, right? That's an extra step. That's a step that requires dedication, devotion, and again, I would say love. If there is no love for those to whom you're teaching, then you're missing that last element. So one of the things that we have to find in our teaching is the ability to find that love. Find that reason for spending this time. Because at the end of the day, if you're just a paycheck to me, and if you're just a reason that I still have my job, then I'm missing most of what I can give you.
I see the teachers in a school, in primary school, and I see the junior ones, and I think it's difficult to teach that kind of things, but what is your advice for that?
It's very hard to know where to start, because one of the things we have is we have an extremely problematic education system in Mexico. It's entirely too centralized, entirely too dependent on habits and, law and regulation in ways that are not dynamic and are not focused on the student. We punish teachers for the wrong things, taking too long, not hitting all the points on the lesson plan, too many students having too low of a grade or too high of a grade. And we certainly do not give them any incentives, money, prizes, time off for doing the opposite, right? For investing time in them. But at the end of the day, the only way that we get to change is by being different. The country we see around ourselves, there is absolutely nothing magical about it. There's no destiny. There is no inevitability. It's just 127 million people that woke up today and made the choices they made today. Tomorrow, half of those people make a different choice. It's a different country. We have to break free from fear. Fear for my position, fear for my job, fear of the government, fear of my peers and those around me, and decided that doing what's right to my life matters more. We have a country that says it's filled with faith. But as I look around, how is that faith being played out? The vast majority of people say they believe in different things. but they say they have these kinds of values and transcendent views. And yet, when they go out and in every action that they take every day, how do you behave in traffic? How do you deal with the people around you? How are you in the crowded market? How do you treat that person who has no real job, but who's still providing a service for you? These are the aggregate actions that we take every single day, and until we make it a personal responsibility to be different, the country never changes. So, do we need massive structural change? Absolutely. I would argue that the entire government needs an entirely new structure. But that's not a magical pill. That's not a magic result. Changing the law, changing what's on paper, changing what you require, that doesn't change us. So until we recognize that as citizens here, as people that are contributing to this society, the choices I'm making today also matter, then when 127 million people say, no, they don't, I guess I'm stuck. Then we get stuck. So I think it's a very difficult question to answer because it's everything has to happen. And then again, we have to be the difference, even if nothing structurally changes. Thank you. Have a great one.
Thank you so much, Dr. Oglesby.
Thank you. We'll be seeing you all.
Despierta. ¿Sabes qué día es hoy? Vas a transformar al mundo haciendo lo que amas. Vas a cambiar las reglas del juego. Vas a mover a otros. Busca, crea, innova, vuela. El mundo te espera. Transfórmalo. Hazlo, UPAEP.